It's often said, frequently jokingly, that aliens are called little green men. This moniker, perhaps, has its roots in European folklore, evoking associations with mythical creatures like Irish leprechauns, small, mischievous, and often elusive beings connected to another world. Be that as it may, the question of whether anyone has actually seen creatures fitting this description remains a subject of heated debate and countless speculations. And yes, a surprising number of people around the world claim that they not only believed in their existence, but had personally encountered them. One of the most unusual, disturbing, and thoroughly documented of these stories is known in the annals of ufology as the terrible night of the Little Green Men in Kelly Hopkinsville. This incident, which became a classic of the genre, unfolded against the backdrop of rural America in the mid-20th century, where belief in the supernatural coexisted with the pragmatism of farming life. It all began on a sultry summer evening, August 21st, 1955, as the sun was already setting, painting the sky over Christian County, Kentucky, in crimson hues. The scene of the events was the tiny, isolated mining town of Kelly, located near the larger settlement of Hopkinsville. At the center of the events was the Sutton family, typical for that place and time. Their life flowed measuredly, according to established traditions that had not changed for many decades, and the Suttons were a vivid, almost archetypal embodiment of this rural way of life. The head of this large clan was Glennie Lucky Sutton, as he was respectfully called by friends and neighbors, a sturdy, practical man, a kind of unofficial patriarch, whose word held the family together. That evening, a large group had gathered in their modest but hospitable home. Lucky himself, his wife, several of their children, and family friends. Sometime shortly before the events described, a man named Billy Ray Taylor, a family friend, had come to visit Lucky Sutton from distant Pennsylvania. The Sutton's house, like many dwellings in that area, lacked modern conveniences such as running water. Therefore, when Billy Ray Taylor felt thirsty that evening, he, without much thought, went out into the yard, heading for the old well, the only source of water. As he approached the well, his attention was drawn to a strange glow emanating from a small, overgrown gully located about 50 yards from the house. Looking closer, he saw a huge, brightly shining, disc-shaped object that seemed to be either hovering above the ground or had just landed. The object emitted a pulsating light that sent shivers down his spine. Shocked and frightened by what he saw, Taylor, forgetting his thirst, ran due chow back to the house and, gasping for breath from excitement, began to excitedly tell about his incredible find. At first, Lucky Sutton, the head of the household, merely laughed at his story, dismissing it as just another tall tale or a figment of an overheated imagination. Who in their right mind would believe such crazy stories about flying saucers? However, the master's skepticism did not last long. Just a short time later, the anxious, frantic barking of their dog, which usually behaved calmly, came from the yard. The dog wasn't just barking, it was whining and darting about, as if it had sensed something alien and dangerous. This sound put everyone in the house on alert. As was customary in those harsh regions, where people were used to relying only on themselves and their weapons, Lucky and Billy, without a word, grabbed their guns. Lucky had a 12-gauge shotgun, and Billy had a .22 caliber rifle, and resolutely rushed to the exit, following the unwritten rule: shoot first, ask questions later. Right at the front door, barely having crossed the threshold, they froze in their tracks, their blood running cold. Before them, just a few steps away, stood a creature the likes of which they had never seen even in their worst nightmares. It was about a meter tall, perhaps a little more, with a disproportionately large head. It was slowly moving straight towards them, its thin arms raised with splayed fingers, as if it were about to surrender or, conversely, demonstrating its intentions. Eyewitnesses later described this creature with frightening details. It had large eyes, huge, glowing yellow eyes without pupils, a mouth that was a long, thin slit without lips, and large, pointed ears like a bat's. The body was thin, with short, slender legs, and its arms ended not in hands, but in something like claws with 3 fingers. The creature's skin had a distinct greenish or grayish-green hue and seemed to glow faintly in the twilight. Upon seeing this greenish, clearly unearthly creature, the friends experienced primal terror. The instinct for self-preservation took over. Billy Ray Taylor, without aiming, raised his .22 caliber rifle and began firing at the approaching figure. Simultaneously, Lucky Sutton discharged both barrels of his shotgun at the creature. Later, they both swore that from such a close range, practically point-blank, it was simply impossible to miss. However, to their astonishment and horror, the bullets and shots seemed to cause the creature no harm. Instead of falling, the little man did an incredible backflip, somersaulting over its head, and with astonishing agility disappeared into the deep shadow of the trees surrounding the house. Stunned, but still on adrenaline, the men hastily returned to the house, slamming the door behind them and bolting it shut. They tried to calm the terrified women and children, but their own composure was at its limit. Not even a few minutes had passed when the same, or a very similar, creature suddenly appeared in one of the house's windows, silently pressing its hideous face against the glass. Shots rang out again, this time from inside the house. When the men, a little later, dared to look outside to assess the results of their shooting, it turned out that only the curtains and the window pane had suffered, and there were no traces of blood or the creature itself outside. And while they were confusedly examining the yard, suddenly from above, from the dark roof of the house, a long, clawed appendage began to slowly reach towards them, clearly trying to touch one of them. Again, instinctive shots tore through the night silence. The creature, or part of it, slid off the roof, glided to the ground like a fallen leaf, and instantly disappeared into the dense thicket of bushes. Billy Ray and Lucky momentarily thought the nightmare was finally over, that they had managed to scare off the uninvited guests. They returned to the house, trying to gather their thoughts and decide what to do next. However, it soon became quite obvious that this was just a lull before a new attack. The little green men, of whom there were apparently several, literally besieged their house. They seemed to be mocking the terrified people, peering into one window, then another, their glowing eyes glinting in the darkness. Each time another figure appeared, the men opened fire. But the bullets and shots seemed to either bounce off the creatures with a dull metallic sound or pass right through them, causing them no harm whatsoever, only irreparably damaging the windows and walls of their own home. This gruesome game of cat and mouse continued for several hours. After several hours spent in continuous fear and tension, realizing that their ammunition was running out and their nerves were shaken, the Sutton family and their guests made a desperate decision to break out, get out of the besieged house, and seek help from the police in Hopkinsville. The entire group, consisting of 11 people, including children, piled into 2 cars and sped at top speed along the night road to the nearest police station. Sheriff Russell Greenwell, who was on duty that night, was quite surprised by the appearance of such a large and clearly frightened group of people. He listened attentively to their rambling, emotion-interrupted account of an attack by little green men. At first, the sheriff, an experienced man not prone to panic, couldn't believe it wasn't a prank or the result of excessive alcohol consumption. However, the sincere terror in the people's eyes, especially the women and children, and the men's insistence made him take the situation more seriously. In the end, he agreed to send a patrol to investigate. When a considerable police force, reportedly numbering up to 20 officers, including the sheriff himself, his deputies, and officers from neighboring precincts, arrived at the Suttons' home, no signs of alien creatures could be found. The only traces of the recent battle were numerous bullet holes and buckshot dents on the walls, doors, and broken windows of the house. The official report, drawn up at the scene, noted that Glennie Lucky Sutton appeared completely sober but genuinely frightened and exhausted by something. The interrogation of other witnesses, mainly neighbors who lived some distance away, showed that they had indeed heard numerous gunshots coming from the direction of the Sutton farm, and some had seen strange lights in the heavens that night. Having done all that could be done in such an unusual situation, inspecting the house and surroundings, interviewing eyewitnesses, the police left the strange house at about 2:15 a.m., leaving the Sutton family alone with their fears. And no sooner had the police cars disappeared from view than the nightmare resumed. The vile creatures returned, as if they had only been waiting for the guardians of the law to leave. And again, they began to peer into the windows, their large eyes glowing in the dark, as if driven by insatiable curiosity or malicious intent. And again, They were shot at with the remaining ammunition.